Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. Today is the 8th day of January, that is, in 2023. And my, have the years gone by quickly as we are being subjected to so many psychological memes, war upon oneself these days. And what I'm going to be reading from is this particular book, um, The Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare by Michael Hoffman. And I'm going to read a section. I just finished the conclusion of a section here, what I would call the dark side of the bad moon, the ritual aspects of criminal politics. Did that earlier today. Now I'm going to call this is going to be the last part of the book. It's called The Rocket Man. This deals with Jack Parsons. I think maybe some people may know who he is or heard of him. So let's continue. Glad you're here. And let's have eyes to be open and ears to hear. Okay. So, The Rocket Man, the history of the decline of America in the 20th century is synonymous with the history of the secret society known as the OTO, a pivotal Masonic successor group. Let us peek into the Secretum Vitale of one OTO initiative who played a central role for the American cryptocracy in the 20th century. This child was born in Los Angeles, that is on October 2nd, 1914. The same day, the Jehovah's Witnesses founder, Charles Taz, T-A-Z-E, Russell, that is Taz Russell, prophesied the beginning of the end of the world with the coming of the Antichrist. The infant born on this day was a product of arranged marriage between wealthy occult buff Ruth Virginia Whiteside and Marvin H. Parsons, of an ancient family of Irish descent who had a hereditary connection with astronomy and lens making. Once the ritual trius was consummated with the birth of the requisite star child, that is, Parsons Sr. was dumped and divorced. His ex-wife Ruth was careful to retain the magical Parsons name throughout her life. Her son, whose legal name was Marvin Whiteside Parsons, was nicknamed John and later Jack. The boy was raised in the city of Pasadena, California, home of the Rosicrucian Bowl Parade, where he resided with his mother and influential maternity grandfather, Walter Whiteside, president of Alice Chandler Manufacturers. Alice Chandler was the manufacturers of tractors in the past. I didn't know that. It's interesting. When Parsons grew to manhood, he would be known within the modern successor to the Masonic Lodge, the OTO, Ordo Tenteros Orientos, as Frater Valerian, the Antichrist, consort of Babylon. Babylon was the OTO peculiar spelling for that is B-A-B-A-L-O-N. Peculiar spelling for the name of the great whore of Babylon, mentioned in the book of Revelations. The OTO was officially founded in the 19th century by two high-ranking Freemasons, Austrian industrialist named Karl Kellner, K-E-L-L-N-E-R, and German police agent Theodor Reuss, R-E-U-S-S, a member of Prussian intelligence. Keller was also the founding member of the magical sects called Sex Magic Circle, known as Hermetic Brotherhood of Light. In 1895, the OTO offered a series of 3 advanced degrees only to the highest Freemasons. This magical sectional was at the heart of the OTO supposed great secret of, or keys to the mysteries. Among Parsons' many sex partners was that of his own mother. Their incestuous encounters were filmed. Wow. Both mother and son also engaged in bestiality, and both appear to have been among that species of psychotic who can function normally in public and achieve positions of authority over others. So this is the reason why Ruth Virginia is enormously involved with this herself. And she just wanted to have someone, a child, and she had a boy, and then she ditched her husband. Among Parsons' many sexual partners was that of his own mother, which we just said that. Both mother and son also engaged in bestiality. Anyway, we did this, say that too. Sorry. To the world outside the OTO, Marvin W. Parsons would be known as Dr. John Whiteside Parsons, a founding member of the California Jet Propulsion Laboratory, known as JPL, inventor of the jet assisted takeoff, discoverer of ammonium perchlorate, I'm going to spell it for you, perchlorate, and founder of Aerojet Corporation. He had been described as the one single individual who contributed most to rocket science and as an individual who traveled under seal orders from the United States government. Parsons is the author of key research and patents for aeronautics and rocket propulsions, which were instrumental in Allied military victories during the Second World War and the NASA moon flights. His Aerojet Corporation, now GenCorp Aerojet, one of the world's largest manufacturers of rockets, continues to produce the solid fuel rocket boosters used by space shuttle. Everything today in the field of solid fuel rockets is essentially Parsons' work. Parsons was a government operative who enjoyed immunity from persecution for sales of explosives on the black market, even for crimes such as autumn 1941 carjacking perpetrated at gunpoint with an associate. In 1942, charges by a 16-year-old boy that he had been homosexually raped by Parsons and other members of the OTO were dismissed as fantasy by investigating Pasadena police officers. They had already been bought and paid for, folks. The police reported that the OTO was little more than an organization dedicated to religious and philosophical speculations with respectable members such as Pasadena's bank president, doctors, lawyers, and Hollywood actors. The Pasadena cops were playing dumb. Parsons' avowed leader, the Englishman Aleister Crowley, was a notorious Satanist, drug addict, and a pederast who had engaged in Solomon rites in the Algerian desert with the Orthodox Jewish man Victor Neuburg, spelled Neuburg. In light of the cops are the bombers' message of Oklahoma City in 1995, it's worth noting for the record that in 1938, Parsons was involved in the trial of 3 LAPD commanders, ostensibly as an expert witness. Captain Earl E. Kynette, Kynnette, and Lieutenant Fred Brown and Roy Allen were accused of the murder by car bombing of a fellow officer, Harry Raymond. All three were convicted. This case remains shrouded in mystery. California Jet Propulsion Laboratory was spawned out of the Harry Guggenheim-funded Guggenheim Aeronautic Laboratories of the California Institute of Technology. That's what I think it's called, what they call Caltech. Before evolving into the JPL under the director of Parsons, the California Institute of Technology was headed by a Hungarian Jewish scientist, Professor Theodor von Karman, Karman. The flamboyant Karman claimed to be a direct descendant of Rabbi Judah Loew of Prague, the Renaissance Kabbalist and supposedly fabricator of the legendary Gentile-hating monster known as the Golem. Rabbi Loew was the occult master of Elizabethan mathematics savant Dr. John Dee. Karman was also a close associate of the U.S. Army General H.A.P. Hart Arnold and a highly placed advisor to the Roosevelt administration. Karman observed Jack Parsons invoke the hymn to Pan, something Parsons did before each rocket test. This dirge to the god of panic and friends was authored by the outer head of the OTO, the former mentioned Crowley, at a 33-degree Freemason, whose carefully cultivated public image as a theoretical Satanist concealed the reality of his role as an agent of British intelligence. Crowley was a well-connected member of the British establishment. His brother-in-law, Sir Gerald Kelly, was president of the Royal Academy and may have been a descendant of John Dee's assistant, Edward Kelly. Perhaps it was a coincidence that Karman and Parsons chose the Arroyo, I'll spell this Arroyo section of Pasadena in the Devil's Gate area, just above a dam at the name for the grounds of the JPL. Here, the laboratory was erected. America's first launch-range missile and space exploration program began. According to William M. Grimstad, nearly 40 years later, someone went to considerable effort to originally arrange the bodies of the victims of the Hillside Strangler serial murder in the Arion Sexco Devil's Gate site. Continue. The OTO seems to have exhibited considerable prescience in establishing a temple in the wilderness atop a mountain outside of San Diego, decades before the mountain was chosen to serve a prime role in space exploration. This occurred on Mount Palomar, Palomar, and one wonders if OTO members possess advanced information when they originally concentrated the mountain far in advance of what would become the locale for the world's big eye on the universe, the 200-inch Palomar telescope. Caltech Jet Propulsion Laboratories were officially opened on Halloween night, 1936. Wow. A photographer was present to obtain pictures of Parson and his colleagues. The photos are referred to by JPL as the nativity scene. Every year at the JPL laboratory, which now employs more than 6,000 people, the nativity scene is ceremonially reenacted in a ritual using mannequins to stand before Parson and his assistants. Parsons' occult handler in this period was Crowley's English-born disciple, William Talbot Smith, whose OTO Agape Lodge in Pasadena was located a few miles from Parsons' home. Here they performed their Gnostic Catholia, Mass of the Gnostic Catholic Church. OTO members were also engaged in screenwriting for Hollywood movies. Among the OTO numerous Hollywood operas was MGM producer who used the alias M. Balcon, Balcon. OTO initiates author mass market stores, especially science fiction, with subliminal occult themes published in popular books and magazines. Among the most influential of these were Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land, or A.H. White, Rocket to the Morgue, and the informal Arthur C. Clarke, The Cynical, and Childhood's End. Clarke had been a leading member of the British Interplanetary Society, a London-based group of elite thinkers and engineers, British Secret Service assets, and sci-fi enthusiasts who were devoted to laying the groundwork for the space age. Their patron saint was the Fabian socialist, futurist, and editorialist H.G. Wells, whose script, aka science fiction novel First Men on the Moon, gave the correct liftoff location for the first man-moon flight, that is, Cape Canaveral, decades beforehand. Clarke had been inspired by the science fiction vision evoked in the works of Wells. He wrote technologically based science fiction in order to promote this vision to a wider public. As the inspiration of numerous space scientists and astronauts, he was a prophet in his own future. This is based upon Robert Poole, Poole, 2001, History Today, January 2001, page 41. By means of newly burgeoning genre of science fiction, the OTO was able to shape the vision of America through predictable programming, which forecasted an inevitable future, thereby influencing everything from architecture of our cities to the design of automobiles and conception of what constitutes progress and liberation in the future. The PBS Frontline documentary called Organ Farm 2, about genetic breeding of beasts who are part human, openly with the following description of the process, it's been called a modern miracle, emerging from science fiction to the operating room. Here's a public admission that the road to the miraculous operating room where we accept the propitious, purely evil tampering that produces man-beasts, humanoids, Hunanoids, H-U-N-I-M-A-L-S, was paid by science fiction. Traditionally, science fiction has appeared to most people as a adolescent genre, the province of time-wasting fantasies. This has been the great strength of this genre as a vehicle for the inculcation of the ideology favored by the cryptocracy. As J.H. Tolson points out in Clowns, only when people think that they are not buying something can the real sales pitch begin. While it is true that that with the success of NASA's Gemini space program and the Apollo moon flights, more serious attention and respectability was awarded science fiction. Nonetheless, in formality seeding times from the late 19th century to the 1950s, the predictive programming known as science fiction had the advantage of being derived as a solitary vice of misfits, juveniles, and marginal adults. The cryptocracy has always cryptocracy has always operated as a rhetorical system. In the Kennedy assassinations, we saw this in the command words, as in hypnosis: Camelot, Storyville, Shakespeare, and Truth or Consequences. Predictive programming works by means of the propagation of the illusion of infallibility, accurate vision of how the world is going to look in the future. This fraud has had a non-inconsiderable impact on our reality. Aleister Crowley, in a statement to the OTO initiatives concerning one of his books, describes the underlying epistemology behind the glamour and enchantment with which crosses the occult con game to become the weird reality we inhabit in America today. In this book, it is spoken of the Sephirah and the paths of spirits and conjurations of gods, spheres, planes, and many other things which may or may not exist. It is immaterial whether they exist or not. By doing certain things, certain results follow. Students are most earnestly warned against attributing objective reality or philosophical validity to any of them. Here, Crowley admits that the OTO is a vehicle for imposing an artificial reality based on nothing but lies and promoted by liars, initiating into the art and science of illusion. Matters have gotten darker than you think in the years since Crowley's death in 1947. In Jack Williamson's sci-fi tale, Darker Than You Think, aliens conspire against the humanity under the leadership of the Child of the Night, a Parsons character who is the result of magical prodigious birth. The OTO ability to transform America consisted in the language of this brazen lying with science and science fiction, molding media and medicine in their image and likeness, and creating a new Thalmudic religion for the masses. These developments were made possible in America, as they always have been, by means of efficiency of rituals repeatedly performed first by Freemasons and then the Kabbalist crowns, the Damascus shrine, and then taken to the last stages of depravity by the OTO. This is a hidden factor behind that which ails us as people and a nation, a factor which almost all of those who urge taking America back refuse to countenance. One of the OTO cabinet of writers even went so far as to fulfill the ambition for a Thelma counter-church for the masses by creating an attractive, influential new religion based on a volatile mix of scientism and occult doctrine. This was the con man extraordinary Lafayette Ron Hubbard, the founder of the Church of Scientology. In a 1946 communique to Crowley, Parsons wrote, "About 3 months ago, I met U.S. Navy Captain L. Rod Hubbard. Although Ron had no formal training in magic, he had extraordinary amounts of experience and understanding in the field. He's the most dominant person I have ever met and in complete accord with our own principles. He's also interested in establishing a new Aeon. We are pooling our resources in a partnership that will act as a limited company to control our business ventures." Parsons subsequently provided Hubbard with the formal training he had lacked, revealing to Hubbard the secrets of the highest grades of the OTO. What did these OTO degrees embody? Parsons was known to invoke spirits called elementals. Parsons wrote the invocation of lesser forms, that is, spirit, angel, demon, elementals, is far more dangerous than the invocation of gods. In the higher work, you are actually wooing the gods. It is an act of art. In the lower, you are compelling it in the art of science. The primary method corresponds to the Elohim system attained by Dr. D. The path to unlocking this Gnostic was central in Twilight language, the once nearly universal subliminal communication system used in Egypt, Babylon, and the Indian subcontinent among the Aztecs, consisting of combinations of numbers, archetype words, and symbols, which in our time are sometimes embedded in modern advertisement and in certain modern films as music. In Oriental Tantra, Tantra, the mantra, including some words I don't know how to pronounce here, are spelled Dharani, Kavada, Kavaca, and Yamala, Yamala, etc. It is sonically calculated to induce a particular action. It forms parts of the original Sanskrit concept of what we call Sanhosian, which is called twilight language. According to the oldest of Kabbalah's texts, it is by this cryptic language that this means or the creation of the artificial life can be discerned. He must make use either of the sounds of the letters of the or of the names. This technique is the one that is used when making a golem. This is from a particular book, Golem, footnote number 98. It's from a guy named Aryeh Kaplan, Kaplan, and the book of Creation in Theory and Practice, based upon, this is in page 22. In Tantra, the Sanhosa is a language of light and darkness, and this higher type of discourse words have a different meaning. This is not to be openly discussed. This is from another guy named Hara, H-A-R-A. This is footnote number 99. P-R-A-S-A-D, Shastri. And then Bhatti, I just have to spell it for you. S-H-A-S-T-R-I, B-A-U-D-D-H-A-G-A-N, D-O-H-A. Another branch of Thai language is called the secret language of the double, i.e. intentionally language, what they call Sanhabadhasa, defined as the intention to imply or suggest something contrary to what is being expressed verbatim. Hence, it's not just a coded language of metaphor or double meaning, but of a double meaning that is opposite of what it is expressed literally. And this is based upon the footnote number 100. This concept is beyond the Brahmins' exegetical categories of literal and euphemisms metaphorically. Easy for me to say. These occult initiatives were completed by Rabbi Lowe in Prague, where D was taught gematria, the Kabbalist practice of substituting numbers for letters in a word to attain its hidden meaning. D termed this twilight language Enochian, and cloaking his Kabbalism in Christian jargon, claiming that angels had revealed to him and his assistant Kelly large tables bearing unusual letters, which supposedly formed the oldest language of all, the language of angels, consisting of a series of holy names and passwords. Parsons was an avatar of this language, and his OTO lodge transmitted to scientists, screenwriters, and novelists the same Gnostic D-E-E, had received. L. Rod Hubbard joined Parsons in his ritual magic. Hubbard was consistently referred to as a scribe throughout Parsons' record of the Babylon working. That's B-A-B-A-L-O-N. Parsons, Hubbard, and OTO knew that during the first atomic bomb blast at Trinity Site in New Mexico, that is the land of enchantment, a large steel cylindrical nicknamed Jumbo by construction workers had been placed near ground zero. They were obsessed with the idea that the cylindrical had been a means of radioactivity animation of tiny mechanism, known as alchemy as a homunculus. I'm just going to spell it for you again. Homunculus. And that this homunculus represents the first creation of artificial life on Earth since Rabbi Lowe's golem. In the inner lore of OTO, nuclear power is regarded as a form of diabolical consciousness, as a literal demonic entity in its own right. Aleister Crowley, through writing allegorically, termed it a tremendously powerful being. Magicians sought to make this homunculus. They proceeded to try to make the homunculus on very curious lines. Furthermore, and this is the crucial point, they thought that by performing this experiment in a specially prepared plane, a plane magically protected against all incompatible forces, and by invoking in that place some one force which they desire, some tremendous powerful being, and they had conjurations which that's thought capable of doing this, that they would be able to cause the incarnation of being of infinite knowledge and power, who would be able to bring the whole world into light and truth. This magical place, protected from all incompatible forces, was the Trinity Site, protected by the war hysteria and the wartime military secrecy of this national security state under siege, when to ask questions is something akin to treason, and where government secrecy is patriotic respect is necessary to victory over the enemy. The genesis of the supposed homunculus entity by atomic fire draws inspiration from Albert Pike's cryptid INRI acronym from the 18th degree of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. Birth by fire renews life. This parody of the INRI acronym, nailed on the cross about Christ, speaking of Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. The allegedly emanated dead matter, Homunculus, was the OTO symbolic child of the new Aeon, the moon child, or the land of death, Egypt. In other words, Horus, son of Iris, Rosemary's baby. OTO doctrine, reflecting ancient occult traditions, holds that one only by first emanating the Homunculus and keeping it incarnate on Earth could tamper with nature, advance to the state of genetic engineering, cloning, and xenotransplant bestiality we have wished we had with us today. Parsons, Hulbert, and the California OTO Lodge, consisting of other JPL and Aerogest scientists, were engaged in both scientific and ceremonial acts intended to keep this alleged Homunculus, which they termed their child, emanate on Earth. The OTO included nuclear physicist from Caltech, JPL scientist Frank Malinian, M-A-L-I-N-A, who was a Communist Party member and a UNESCO official. An operative for within the U.S. government included Hubbard, who reported directly to U.S. Naval Intelligence, and Parsons' sex partner, Marjorie Cameron, who was an aide to the Joint Chief of Staff. So you can see what's going on here, folks. These people are playing with a lot of stuff. Let me continue here. Let me get a drink of water. Scientology founder J. L. Ron Hubbard was at Parsons' site during his magnus opus, which was codenamed Babylon Working. Though not all details are available even now, it has been established that Parsons managed to impregnate Marjorie Cameron in the course of a Babylon Working. The baby was then aborted, according to Parsons' instructions, and the fetal tissue furnished to government agents who, at the OTO, believed had custody of the alleged Homunculus. What precise use was made of this aborted baby remains unknown at this writing. Okay. Coincidentally, the toxicology studies indicate that Parsons' ingredient for his rocket fuel, ammonium perchlorate, is an indoctrinated. I'm sorry. I got PERCHLORATE is an endocrine disruptor which may seriously harm fetal development among pregnant women working in facilities where it is stored or spilled. After Parsons and Hubbard's 3-day ritual of March 1946, Parsons proclaimed the physical reality of the Homunculus and gave its gender as female. Babylon is incarnated upon the earth today, awaiting the proper hour of manifestation. Parsons proclaimed the spiritual aspect of this incarnation of Babylon as an affinity between it and the women's liberation movement, which at that time was in its infancy. He wrote, "Her spirit is within all women who proclaim their equality with men." At this junction, I wish to point out that I am not here asserting the existence of any Homunculus, atomic or otherwise, or a belief in any of the other demeaning Kabbalist notions with which elite occult zealots are hogtie and hornswag. One of my aims is to draw the reader's attention to the fact that respected high-level executives, not just grungy old rock and roll singers in capes and fangs, do believe in these foul things and do act on these beliefs, however dubiously their authenticity. This is a crucial point. As Crowley himself said, it is the belief apart from any underlying reality which causes the overlords of the levers of establishment power to mold the world we inhabit and condition us. By that molding, as Clark forecast in his book Childhood's End, to eventually accept the open, undisguised rule of Satan himself. In this vein, we observe that Parsons predicted that the entire nation would embrace Thelma. Parsons' prophecy about the acceptance of Thelma by the Americans being fulfilled partly because the American people have had a misplaced faith in their authority figures, especially when these figures are cloaked in the mantle of science. Yeah, science is just as much a superstition as others, folks. Okay. Such authorities are in fact usurpers and not representative of true authority, nor do they practice authentic science, which can only be based on truths which are in harmony with nature. America has been deliberately rotted by ritual means, emanating from the very top of the dollar bill pyramid. In 1948, as part of his work in support of the alleged homocutus, Parsons entered into the employ of the Israeli government. At various times, Parsons was employed by the Los Angeles Police Department, the Los Angeles Superior Court, the U.S. Army and Navy, and the National Defense Research Council, holding a top secret security clearance. Much of his work remains classified and cannot be obtained even under the Freedom of Information Act. Parsons' FBI file is heavily redacted. What is known is that Parsons was transferring secret documents related to U.S. rocket and defense technology to the Israelis from October 48 until June 1950, when he was apprehended by personnel from the Propulsion and Research Development Laboratory of Hughes Aircraft. Parsons' immunity held fast in this case, as in all the others, however. On October 25, 1951, at the personal intervention of J. Edward Hoover, the United States Attorney declined to prosecute Parsons for treason or espionage, and he continued to maintain his dealings with the Israelis. On June 17, 1952, Parsons was killed in an explosion at his quarters in Pasadena. He was 37 and supposedly about to depart for Israeli-occupied Palestine via Mexico when the blast occurred. Parsons was employed at the time of his death by the U.S. Navy. He was alleged to have been at work on a Naval Ordnance Department research project. Pasadena police assigned one greenhorn detective named Donald Harding to investigate the blast. It was his first case. Based on Harding's finding, the current office ruled that no inquest would be held. Parsons' mother was either poisoned or committed suicide a few hours after her son's death. Wow. Parsons' sex magic consort, Marjorie Cameron, lodged with Renee Drunks for 6 months after Parsons' drugs, let's just say this again, with Renee, R-E-N-A-T-E, drugs, D-R-U-K-S, for 6 months after Parsons' death. Drugs told a reporter, "I have every reason to believe that Jack Parsons was working on some very strange experiment, trying to create what the old alchemists called homunculus." On March 2nd, 1946, L. Rod Hubbard made the following prophecy concerning Parsons in Babylon. "She is the flame of life, power of darkness. She destroys with a glance. She may take thy soul. She feeds upon the death of men. She shall absorb thee, and thou shalt become living flame." Parsons himself wrote, "And in that day my work will be accomplished, and I shall be blown away." In August of 1952, the popular California magazine called People's Today published an article about Parsons, which stated that he had been part of the Black Magic cult, which included many prominent residents of Los Angeles and Pasadena area. In 1953, Parsons' former associate, Mark M. Mills, was killed in a helicopter crash at what described as a Eniwetok atomic bomb test site, and spelled Eniwetok, atomic bomb test site. In 1961, Marjorie Cameron appeared in Curtis Harrington's Hollywood film Night Tide, playing the role of an alien brought to life by sorcery and speaking Twilight language. On Halloween night, October 31st, 1968, on the 32nd anniversary of the foundation of Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL unveiled a memorial plaque dedicated to John Parsons. In 1972, NASA named a crater on the moon for Parsons through the mediation of the International Astronomical Union. Parsons was the only Guggenheim/Caltech scientist to receive this honor. Parsons Crater is located on the dark side of the moon. My criticism of the elite, whether culturally or scientific, is not intended as a church's dismissal of avant-garde artists or high achievers. Marlowe is a towering figure in literature and decidedly anti-occult, as was John Milton and Edgar Allan Poe. French novelist and philosopher L.F. Céline and the visionary artist Antonio Artaud both campaigned against the Gnostics of the Western secret societies. Artaud's anti-occult activities led to his forceful incarceration at an insane asylum, where he was tortured with electrical shock. Arton called Masonic manipulation of the group mind tentacle evil. Nikola Tesla is far and away the leading example of a benevolent scientific wonderkind who worked in harmony with nature and against the polluted Thelma current. 102 is the last footnote here of this book. And it says, except where otherwise indicated, quotations in the preceding section on Parsons are from Sex and Rockets, The Occult World of Jack Parsons by John Carter. This is from Venice, California, Ferret House, 1999. Carter's scholarly industry in excavating the far-flung details of Parsons' life is commendable. He's rendered an often complex mass of arcane data and biographical material easy reading. Unfortunately, Mr. Carter is naive, that is, liberal, and often fails to discern the false leads and fabrications sprinkled throughout accounts and public correspondence of the OTO. This organization and its agent are venerably byword for deception and disinformation. Hence, their great attraction to and involvement with the intelligence agency of the U.S., Britain, Prussia, and the Israelis. On a number of points, Carter makes errors, in fact, suppositions. I have corrected those whenever possible. Okay, that is it for today for Michael A. Hoffman's book, the second, The Secret Society and Psychological Warfare. And if you understand anything, what's going on around you, folks, it is psychological warfare, not just here in America, but all over the world. And so I want to share this with you today, and I hope you were able to follow me. I'm sorry, my throat's just been kind of bothering me today, and sinuses have bothered me, I guess, and then also difficult words that I don't normally pronounce. So I ask that you forgive me for that. But I do believe that this is important. Again, I think I've read just about almost all of this out of this book, as well as I recollect. I did some other videos earlier. I'll maybe just share some photos maybe another time. But I did want to tell you that Dr. John Dee was considered 007. That's in this book here also, of the British Intelligence Agency, or MI6, as I should say. So I hope that you enjoyed it. Appreciate it, you being here. And again, it's important you understand what kind of forces that were actually taking place. It is all psychological warfare in many ways, folks. And most people are not aware of it. So I'm trying to make people aware of this whole thing. Thank you for being here again. Have a good day.